Hey everyone, Mike Rosehart here for another YouTube installment, and today we are talking about the 3 appraisal approaches for valuing real estate, how appraisers value property in Canada, and the 3 ways you go about valuing a property. Because we were just talking off camera about, how do you go about valuing a property and determining arbitrage, right?
Yeah, what the appraiser's looking at, and I don't know any of them. So.
As an any arbitrager, you're looking for when you buy a property, right, and you've used imperfect information, or it was a bad listing or bad photos, whatever it was. Let's say you can re-rent it for more money. Whatever you've used as an any arbitrager, the way that you actually cash out on being an any arbitrager, and the only thing that actually matters is what the market thinks the value is. So any arbitrager thinks value is 200. If any arbitrager is wrong and the appraiser says no, it's worth 150, or the market says no, it's 150. You can get bad appraisers all the time, so we'll talk about that, but differing opinions and stuff. But the market values it at, say, 150, then any arbitrager is wrong and she's lost money. So this is why valuing a property is really, really important. You need to know how to value a property, and we could spend days talking about some ways you could do that, but at a high level, an appraiser is looking at 3 different ways to value a property. The first is the comparable analysis approach. So most appraisers out there that I've met, especially with the single family, owner-occupied type property analysis, they use called the comparable analysis approach. And comparable analysis is they go and they find properties within, ideally as close to your property as they can find geographically. So typically within like a 1 kilometer radius, and they'll say, okay, now I want to look for properties that are like your property. So close to your area, basically as identical to your property as they can find. So if they could find a house that was identical to your property, square footage wise, design wise, renovation wise, bedrooms, bathrooms, lot size, all of these things, then they would just take that property and say it sold recently, because it has to be in the last 6 months. Sometimes they can stretch it a little bit further, but typically they're looking within the last 6 months of sales. The appraiser will find a property, say it sold for 200. Your property, they will think then is worth 200 based on the comparable analysis approach. Now where it gets a bit tricky with the comparable analysis approach is, let's say you have a corner lot with a big backyard and an extra bedroom. They have to find comps that are close, comparable properties, and then they have to use in their spreadsheet, they have to adjust for these factors. So they might find, and usually they have to pull a minimum of 3 or 4 comps, and they'll have one comp that's like the head comp.
So is that just Geo Warehouse kind of thing that they'd be pulling those from?
Typically, yeah, okay. Geo Warehouse. So just sales that usually they have to use publicly listed sale, like MLS, realtor sales, because those are more accurate than private sales. Private sales sometimes are a little wonky. So I've had opportunities where, in my experience working with appraisers, where they won't use private sales. Because they just say, no, the realtor wasn't involved, it wasn't an MLS listing. So what you can do is you could pay a realtor to be involved if you wanted to in the transaction, a few $100, and then it would be, and he'd pop it on MLS and bring it down. Yeah. There are strategies you can use to get properties on MLS. And like when we're talking about comparable analysis approach, there's a ton of arbitrage here. I owned a few properties in the same street, and when I sold one for say they're all 250, and I sell one to a Toronto investor for 300, all my properties are now worth 300. Based on the comparable analysis approach. So there's a lot of ways to manipulate the market. So often I'll sell my best property first that's most comparable to these other ones, and it'll get the highest value, and then I can use that comparable to sell the next ones. And the realtor will use that comparable with his clients and say, down the street, this one just sold for 300. These ones are worth at least 300 now because the market's appreciating and blah, blah factors.
So if your neighbor's got a nicer house, they sell, then it'd be a good time to... Yeah.
I had a day where one sold down the street here. And I remember, I think I did a video on it on my Facebook. So on Facebook, I used to do a daily video journal. I took a challenge. I did 200 videos. Every single day I did a video. Jeez. Doing something. And they were terrible videos. Like I was just my cell phone, like, it's 1 in the morning. I'm so tired. I renovated all day.
Video 200.
It's actually like daily video journal 190. And in some of those videos, there was a day I remember where a house sold on this street and then another house sold on this street in the same day last spring when things went crazy. And on that day, when my realtor sent me those comps, he sends me everything that sells in the area so I can keep fresh. And I was like, holy, I just made $50,000 in one day. Like on each property that I owned on that street. Yeah. So it was like, that was a $100,000 day. And that's a really good feeling. You're being a Susie speculator because you don't know what the market's gonna do, but that was a really, really good day where I made a lot of money because some good comps in the area finally had allowed that, that market, price to rise. And that's sort of how you solidify that. So one comp might not be enough, but if a second and third start happening, it's now a new baseline. So that's sort of when the market's rising, there's like a baseline where things will fall to, and that sort of helps you lock that in. So comparable analysis approach is definitely the one that appraisers rely on the most.
So a quick question for the comparable analysis one. This might be getting into details a little bit, but
that's okay.
For properties that are purchased with 5% or less, and where you're getting that CMHC insurance, is the number plus CMHC insurance the listed sale price? Or is it the number without? Because like, say you're paying an extra $10,000 for the insurance, does that go onto the sale price in the listing for comparables, or is that kept separate?
No. So we'll get into this in the income analysis approach. So there's three ways, right? There's the comparable analysis approach, income approach, and cost-based approach to appraising properties. Appraisers look at what it's sold for, not what it costs you to finance it. So if you borrow from someone, and let's say you CMHC, right? Yeah. It's going to cost you a little bit more. You're paying for that insurance separately. It's thrown into your mortgage.
So it's separate from... Yeah, it's in your mortgage, not in the sale price.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so sale price is just what it's sold for. Let's say it's sold for $200,000. If you close it with CMHC, or you close it 100% in cash, or you close it with a 30% interest mortgage, they don't care. Appraiser doesn't care what your financial situation is all about. And that's why when you do the income approach to appraising, what you'll find is that you wonder why don't you use certain expenses like mortgage payments, so mortgage interest, why isn't that included in the income approach? It's not. They remove that because everyone finances their property different. Everyone has different interest rates. So when you're using an income approach to value a property, and they use the cap rate approach, so determining the value based on the cap rate, which every market has a different cap rate. And in London, Ontario, the appraisers now are using an 8 cap rate. So let's walk through an example using the income approach. Income approach is the second way, and typically what I find is appraisers are using an income approach and a comparable analysis approach in London, Ontario, and they're blending the two if it's a rental property. If it's a single family, they only use the comparable analysis approach. And then cost-based approach is really just, they say what would this cost to rebuild, or if it's a new build, often they'll use what was the cost to build this property. What was the value of the land? Sometimes they use that when there's no comps.
I think that would be undervaluing. Usually, is that
sometimes
fair guess? Okay.
Yeah, so that's why they don't use it very often. But you can use a cost-based approach if it's like a custom. If you built like a $3 million mansion and there's no other comps in the area, they have to use a cost-based approach. Sometimes. So I rarely see cost-based approach, but it does exist. It is a way to value properties, especially when you don't have any comps and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's just a way that you can value props. So income approach is they use a cap rate essentially. So an income approach says you take the net operating income, right, the NOI, and you divide that by the cap rate. So in London, it tends to be an 8 cap rate. It used to be a 9 or 10. You can still find 9 or 10 in London pretty safely, even higher than that if it needs renovation work. And you can create some of that any arbitrage opportunity.
Sorry, you take your net income and you divide it by...
So typically what they use is gross rents minus insurance, all the utilities, and the taxes. That's typically the rule of thumb they use. They don't typically take any of their expenses into play. They don't factor in CapEx or OpEx expenditures, maintenance expenditures. They don't factor in...
I don't think I know what CapEx or OpEx
I probably should be more general. So an OpEx expense is like your toilet leaks and you have to send in a plumber to fix it.
So alright, sure.
Basically operating maintenance type expenses. A CapEx expense is something that it'll happen.
Like roof?
Like a roof, a furnace, that sort of thing. Like the windows break, you need to put new windows in.
Sure.
Capital expenditure in nature is one that I like to budget for. Like I'll even put 0.5% of the value of the property per year into a fund, into a slush fund that I call my CapEx allowance or budget. And then when something comes up on the roof, I amortize that or depreciate that over the life that I have the property for. In Canada, there's a guideline you have to use. There's certain set timelines they give you for certain items. They'll determine the life for you sometimes. There's usually a range. You can select how long you think the roof's going to last, and you amortize that over a longer period of time. People who don't factor in CapEx are crushed when, let's say, it's barely cash flowing and something like a roof happens or a furnace happens. And if you're not budgeting for those things in your net operating income, you're going to be a little bit sideswiped.
Yeah, you'd probably just need to hope property appreciated, and that's when you do your refi kind of thing.
Essentially, yeah, you'd be
Hope
relying on
anyway, yeah.
some other factor,
Yeah.
but you haven't built it into your income approach. So yeah, typically that's what they use. They don't use mortgage interest in the net operating income. So net operating income. Let's say you're bringing in like, you can pull out a calculator and give me an example.
Not pulling out my phone.
Let's log into my phone here live. The video's not live, but I'm doing a live analysis. So let's say you bring in $2,000 a month on a property right now in rental income.
Sure.
And your hydro is $100, your water's $100, and your gas is $100 for easy numbers. So you take off 100, so 300 off, and then your insurance on the property is $70 a month, let's say, right? And then what else did I say? The insurance, taxes. I forgot about the property taxes on the property. So your property taxes are $215 a month. So your net operating every month is $1,415. So you multiply that by 12, get your annualized. So you're $16,980 for the calculation. Divide by say 0.08, which is what a lot of appraisers using the income approach do. So that property's worth $212,250.
Oh, okay.
So that's how an appraiser might come at valuing the property, and they'll support it with comps typically. So they'll use the 8 cap rate approach and say this is what the property's cash flowing at. Often they'll take your leases and trust your word for it. So that's sort of how you give them the gross rents, and then I actually do an income statement every single time I do an appraisal. I put one in and I say, here are the numbers, here are the backup documents. I give them the whole package every time I get an appraisal.
Please consider this.
Exactly. Please consider this, and then I'll even recommend some comparable properties. I'll say I've pulled 5 or 6 to help make your job easier. It's your call at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But here are 5 or 6 that I think are good comps. Tell me what you think. And you don't want to be too forward, and you don't want to offend them, but
Yeah, I'm sure they want
make their job easier, and
Yeah.
they're more likely to help you out. And yeah, the cost-based approach, we talked about that. So 3 ways, right? You've got the comparable analysis approach, the income approach, and the cost-based approach to valuing real estate. This is what appraisers use to value real estate. It's funny because sometimes people will buy properties in the market based on emotion, based on no approach at all. And so that's why you get some irregularities and some arbitrage opportunities and things like that. But yeah, that's how you go ahead and value a property, and we can talk more about that in the next video, I guess. So.
Sure, yeah.
We'll do another video here on, you know what, I'm gonna do a closeout. I'm gonna edit all this out. So, what was I gonna say? Thank you guys for watching. This has been, maybe I'll leave this, it'll be more authentic. I think people might like the unedited pieces.
You could.
Maybe I will.
It's your choice.
Give a different side of things. So this has been another video with Mike Rosehart and
Fraser Sutherland.
And so we are talking today, we talked about the 3 ways that an appraiser values a property and 3 ways that you can use then to value properties. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe. The more subscribers I get, the more motivation I have. If I post a video and people are watching it, it gives me motivation to edit those videos and make more videos. And of course, if you found it valuable, share it on your social media, because then it could help someone in your network to buy properties smarter and to make more money. And we all want to make more money. There's a lot out there.
Yeah,
a lot of money
most
for all of us. It's enough to go around.